All right, welcome back to Dirty Boots Capital. Today we have Drew back with us. Drew is a business owner. He has a couple of trucking companies himself, and Drew is going to help us understand a little bit about what's happening in the trucking industry today. I know there's a lot of changes happening out there. So, Drew, welcome back to Dirty Boots Capital.
Hey Tony, thanks for having me back. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Last time we had you on, we had a great conversation about the trucking industry and where things were and how you guys were being affected by supply and demand and labor shortages and gosh, so many different things. And so that was a couple of months back. So why don't you bring us up to speed as to where you guys are today, what you're seeing in the trucking industry?
Things did change a bit when it comes to you probably you interested in those things. You probably read a couple of articles, and those kind of supply chain shortages they kind of leveled out a little bit. Is not as crazy as it's been, and if you've seen the number of ships in Los Angeles went down. But at the same time, they expect about like 35% increase in all the East Coast ports going forward, just because they don't want to have these issues, that we had over the past couple of years anymore. But there was a lot of pent up demand, which a lot of retailers, I think, stocked up in Q4 of 2021. And since that has been done and over with, the slowdown itself, to be honest with you, actually started at the end of Q4, towards probably the end of December. We kind of seen that it kind of started flatlining, the volumes weren't increasing anymore. And then once, we rolled over into January, it kind of mellowed down even more. And right now, we literally seeing that sometimes even on a daily basis, some of these areas, where you would have a lot of freight that it's not being moved, and price variations, it's like $200-300 per load in certain areas, just on a couple of days basis. So yeah, so since the beginning of January, the rates per mile have been falling down, as all the expenses has been increasing, we've been watching.
Yeah, one of the reason why I like to chat with you about this stuff is because the movement of supply by the trucking industry from the ports to the warehouses to the homes and the businesses. I mean, man, that's like you don't get any better boots on the ground than that to kind of see how the economy is working and if there's slowdowns or if there's bottlenecks in there. That really gives you pause to do some critical thinking like we do. I know you do, to be able to kind of noodle through it and just kind of figure out where we are with all of this. Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? And that is why last week I shared some articles with you. I'm going to bring up a couple of articles and maybe you can help us walk us through and help us understand some of these things. So this first article is from Freight Waves. It says trucking industry will be in trouble. You guys are going to be in trouble, Drew, if demand drops to pre-COVID levels. So they talk about dropping to pre-COVID levels. And so one of the things I wanted to show here was the total count of tractors and fleets for hire. And so what's happened has been just a fantastic increase in the number of for hire tractors since December of, it looks like 2021. So Q4, it's just exploded with the number of for hire tractors.
When you talk about freight, everybody is like, well, if there's a lot of freight, then the trucking is doing good. If there's not a lot of freight, the trucking is doing bad. What usually happens through these cycles, and it's extremely cyclical when it comes to trucking, the industry kind of cleans itself out, right? You have bad times. So a lot of companies, they go bankrupt, they consolidate, some guys go out of business, some guys retire. All in all, they don't want to deal with this. This is what I think mostly kind of affects trucking. Now, over the last couple of years, we've seen a huge increase in trucking companies being formed. People coming to the trucking industry that have no idea about trucking. And just to give you an example, I had a couple of gals that, approached me and they like, I want to buy a truck and lease onto your company. I heard, the trucking is good and everything is fine. One of them is a nurse, and another one is working some government facility. I can't recall what her job is exactly, but they absolutely have no idea how it works, what's going on, how to, drivers, trucks, what needs to be repaired, what they just heard that the trucking is good. And when you have these things coming into market, what we are kind of nearing the top of it. The freight, we might not have had that big of a fallout when it comes in freight, even though we did had that kind of pent up demand catch up in Q4. But at this point, I think we are just basically overwhelmed with the amount of trucks that's on a road. And that kind of, it all creates just a supply and demand. When that article kind of references, the pre-COVID levels, and the pre-COVID levels is basically 2019 was a bloodbath in trucking. A lot of companies were created during 2017 and 18, and all this supply of trucks, and just not enough kind of freight to share between everybody, that made rates go down, and that's pretty much it. Then brokers have the leverage basically on how much they want to pay for certain lanes, and this is how you have that kind of bust, if you say so.
Yeah.
Another thing is, I think that kind of did a lot of good for trucking is intermodal, right? So everything that comes off ships, all these containers, the orders were flying through the roof, right? People were ordering everything, we were shipping everything here. And a lot of trucks, a lot of capacity had to go to hauling these trailers off the ships, off the ports, into warehouses, even over the road, which you usually don't do. You unload into warehouse and then you put them, into the trailer, and then you haul, over the road through different states and distribution centers. But I think what happened, a lot of it is also, since we couldn't order equipment, we couldn't get trailers, we couldn't get trucks, chip shortages, there's a bunch of trucks that were sitting. As an example, we ordered 10 units in at the beginning of January 2021. So we finally received the units at the beginning of February in 2022. So it took a year. Usually the turnaround time is 5 months, maybe even 3 months, but no more than 6. So the amount of time that it takes, to get equipment just doubled. So when you don't have enough trailers, a lot of these intermodal, trailers, they just got shipped, directly from the port to, I don't know, distribution centers, went over the road, not just last mile deliveries. And that kind of contributed to a lot of trucks being taken off over the road and doing these deliveries. When you have that, there's not enough capacity, to haul freight for, 500, 800,000 miles or even longer. And that kind of, you made that distortion where, the rates just went through the roof basically in second part of 2020 and 2021. But, the amount of companies that, have been created over the last couple of years, year and a half, I think this is what kind of contributes a lot to why we having this slowdown right now too. A lot of guys, went and bought trucks and again, if the unit costs 150,000, in 2019, I mean, a lot of companies bought these units for, like 200,000, 220. Some of them
they were paying a premium.
Yeah, I mean, these are crazy amounts. It's how you value it from bank's perspective, right? How you put value in that unit, how you put it on your balance sheet at this amount. So if the rate slows, drops down, and it will, as we already seen, I think a lot of these companies that were created within those last 2 years are going to have extremely stretched balance sheets, which I'm not sure if they will be able to kind of accommodate and make the right payments, and especially with fuel going up. These costs you can't control. You have to make the payment. The fuel is going up. You can't, for a bigger fleet, I guess, you can make some adjustments. You get bigger fuel discounts because of a volume that you get. You can adjust some things when it comes to marketing. You can, pay more attention to safety and you can control a little bit of a maintenance. There's some adjustments where you can tweak, where you can save some money. For a smaller fleet, you don't really have these options. You pretty much get everything retail. And that's is really hard when when the rates drop. It's it's not fun.
So you're saying the trucking industry is just going through a natural cycle, right? It goes through its peaks and valleys, and like any business, for the most part, right? So this is just pure capitalism, right? There's a need,
Yeah.
right? People rush in to fill that need, right, wrong, or indifferent, right? Those maybe new carriers or unskilled carriers, they are probably going to go out of business, right? So one of the things I've been looking at, just like not just trucking, but all different types of businesses. I'm just wondering how some of these small businesses are going to be able to stay in business in the future, right? For a large trucking company, they can get discounts on fuel, right? They may be able to get parts quicker, or maybe they even already have a supply house, right? That they have where they already have the parts in stocks. So they're able to absorb some of these problems, whereas some of the smaller businesses, whether it's trucking or a restaurant business or a small hotel chain, right? Some of those small businesses aren't going to be able to absorb those shocks.
Yeah, yeah, and especially another thing is like if you're a bigger carrier, right? You have more capacity, so you usually have at least some, I would say, I don't know, depending on a carrier, but 20, 30, maybe 40% of contracted rates. This is basically where you get constantly loads. The volumes might differ a little bit, but at least some part of your business doesn't fluctuate that much. So that you're going to get some revenue stream from this side of the business regardless of what
Yeah.
happens. So you can plan some things. Now, if you are a small carrier, you can't do that. You don't have the luxury of kind of going bid on lanes, and be able to haul 30, 40 loads per week for somebody. And once you don't have that ability, you have to go and kind of, play this game in a spot market. And spot market is, you live by it. When the times are great, it's $5, $6 per mile, and everybody's clapping hands, and
Yep.
beautiful, buying homes and cars and jewelry and stuff like that. But when
Yep.
things go bad, you feel it in the spot market, and you literally get, the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And it's extremely hard to survive in these conditions. And then another thing I think right now we kind of getting a double whammy in the trucking. So one of it is a lot of trucking companies created, right? So this is kind of just a regular cleansing cycle. Another thing is since we have that high of inflation, a lot of people are drawing back on their purchases, right? We don't buy that much stuff anymore. We don't order that. And so we have a waning demand, for trucks. And at the same time, we have people purchasing less, so it's kind of two things at a time, too much trucks and not enough loads.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So that gets to this chart here, the outbound tender reject index. So this is, the reject rate. If somebody came in and said, "Hey, Drew, I need you to carry some cargo for me," back in June, right, of 2021, because you didn't have drivers or you didn't have the parts to put on your trucks, you may have rejected that rate at that time, that shipment that they wanted you to make at that time. You may have rejected it because you didn't have workers or you didn't have parts to put on your truck to make them roll, right? Whatever it was. But now that's been rolling over. And that's partly due to the number of trucks that are on the road. So the reject rate, it has come down significantly. 2019, 2020, that was an interesting time right there where nothing was getting rejected. Actually, the rates were probably rock bottom here.
So in 2019, as you see, the brokers had no wrong price.
Yeah.
Whatever they gave you, this is what you took and you hauled. I think it was in 2019 when we had all these truckers going to the White House, because of these practices that the brokers were using. Because a lot of brokerages have also like contracted rates, and the whole hysteria was because if the broker has a load, which he has a contract for 5 years to, let's say, haul at $2.50, and because of the capacity, he's selling that load for $1.50.
Yeah.
His margins are extreme, and that's why all the truckers were getting pissed.
Yeah.
But again, this is just like you said, this is just pure capitalism.
Now that we see the rejects rolling over, right? The reject rate rolling over, and less loads being rejected,
Yeah.
and with higher gas prices, right? I can't imagine what you guys are, what your line item for diesel looks like. I mean, that's got to be a huge burden. A trucking company sees it go up 20 cents. That's huge for you guys.
Yeah, and we seen go up by like $2. So So, so just again for the weekend, as our trucks roll through the weekend, right? On Monday, you get kind of a direct bill from, from Pilot. This is who we work with directly, and those expenses increased by like 30%. So and these are huge. These are huge margins when you take the amount of trucks. We as a trucking company, I think the average we do is around like 170,000 gallons per month. So if you multiply it by 30% increase, and this is
Yeah.
it shippers, and this is again, this is happening when there's too much supply. So shippers are not actually, or the brokerages or shippers are not always compensating that, especially in a spot market. They
Yeah.
don't care about that, right? They actually minimizing the rates because the amount of trucks.
Yeah.
So as your expenses go up, your rate go down.
Yeah.
So that's
They
that.
they have all the chips. They have all the bargaining power right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, these shifts, happen every, 2, 3, 4 years, and
Yeah.
it's inevitable.
Yeah. And so what I want to do is I also want to share an article here. Biden highlights new trucking jobs amid looming downturn. So, I mean, like you're highlighting, where we might be facing into a downturn here in the trucking industry. But the president here, so this is White House administration is saying, since President Biden took office, we have seen historic increases in trucking employment in 2021, registering as the best year for trucking employment since the 1994 and December 2021 through February 2022 as the best 3-month stretch for long distance truck hiring since the 90s. And he goes on to say, and Frontline Truckers' real wages grew this year despite elevated inflation. Drew, that doesn't make sense to me. How can they say the truckers, have you seen that? Truckers' real wages are growing despite inflation?
We do have increases, Tony, but this is kind of, funny for me is how you can brag, when you throw, billions of dollars to people and they start ordering, obviously, right? Again, we just go to supply and demand, more goods. So obviously more trucking companies going to join the force. And I guess you can brag about it. Hey, how we made this scale up,
Yeah.
put all
And
these
it's
people
easy
that
to
work.
do when the industry was shut down for like 2 years because of the pandemic. It's so easy.
Yeah, but I would say, why don't we revisit this conversation at the same time next year? And let's see how much we can brag about it at that point. When everybody is going to be going underwater, and when they're going to have to make these adjustments. So it's not really, well, we know politicians, Tony, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what they do. But to they had to be made some adjustments. We raised the wages. I actually did that. I want to say probably in the summer of 2021, as we see that going. And we increased everybody's wages here in the office probably by like 10% at that point. It was obvious that this is not going to be something temporary, and we're going to have to deal this going forward. For drivers, it just depends. It kind of, you have a threshold of how much increases, because when you hire drivers, a lot of it goes to driving record, experience, and stuff
Sure.
like that. This is what determines kind of the kind of your pay per mile. But as trucking companies being kind of struggling to find more drivers, because there was a lot of startups, we've seen some crazy rates per mile that these companies are paying. But again, this brings back to the point where you pay without even calculating how much it costs for you to run a company, and what your margins are. So when you earn a lot per mile, a lot of these guys don't even count like what it costs for me to operate, what's maintenance, what's insurance, what's fuel,
Yeah.
what's office, how much you pay vendors, all of these go into consideration. And then when the rates start dropping and you have drivers that you hired for, I don't know, 90 cents per mile, which is not sustainable in any way, what do you do? As
Yeah.
soon as you're gonna cut, their so it's kind of, it went up,
Yeah.
but then it's going down at the same time. So I'm glad they
Yeah.
took those 3 months.
I think truckers, the trucking industry is just one example where the small to medium size enterprises there in trucking, or, you name it, the small ones are the ones that are going to struggle, if not totally get eliminated because of these struggles that we're pointing out here. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this all turns out, but I think maybe one day we'll just be facing into, all we're going to have is like Walmart, Costco, BJ's, and the Microsofts, and that's just a worry beat. I'm not making a prediction there, but um, you know,
But see, the thing, Tony, is where we're kind of, sometimes when you have historic highs, right? Everybody is at the high level. We all know everything is gonna come down eventually,
yeah,
especially in trucking. This is so extremely cyclical. So, instead of maybe buying into it when everything is really good, give yourself kind of some breathing room and do that when things go down. But it's hard to see those things when you're not in trucking, right? If you
yeah,
just heard, like, hey, it's trucking good, and I'm going to jump into it without doing any research, you don't know about those
you're gonna get
cyclical,
burnt.
yeah, exactly. So, but if you in this industry, and I had some dispatchers that left my company and started their own, and they
Mhm.
kind of mid-sized fleets right now, where they 25 to like 40 trucks, and they doing pretty good, because they know the industry, they know the prices at which they should purchase their trucks, how much the maintenance cost,
Yeah,
how much they should pay for insurance. So they're pick their battles at the right time. So and for us, like, we haven't gone out and purchased equipment like retail. Whatever we had in orders, this is what we got. We didn't go out and be like, give me some more, and the trucks will cost you 30,000 more. Like, I don't care, just give me some more,
yeah,
because we make a commitment for equipment, for 5 years. So, what, we're gonna have a 1, 2 good years, and then for the next 3 years, I get stuck with all these, high bills.
yeah.
So, you usually wait for these downturns, and that's when you're trying to go shopping. You're trying to kind of, put some fat on, so to
Yeah,
say.
no, you know the business, so you see these business cycles and you run your business the right way. There's some other folks who unfortunately aren't doing it. I mean, I do. So I want to wrap up the conversation here with maybe you providing a prediction. So we just saw the March CPI number come out yesterday. It went from the end of February at 7.9, and yesterday it came out at 8.5% for CPI print. So inflation continues to go up. With these ports opening up and more truckers on the road and more supply making their way to the shelves, if I have more supply, prices should start to level off. In my mind, I also take a look at your increased fuel cost, your increased labor cost, your increased cost for parts to keep your trucks running. Maybe we do continue to see inflation for the balance of this year, even though more parts are making it to the shelves because the ports are open and more truckers are on the road. What do you think?
Just by kind of connecting the dots, right, of what's going on, and not just in trucking, just
Yeah,
in a world in general, right? I think we're heading into some times where we just gonna have elevated inflation. I'm not sure, or stagflation, I guess, to your point. I'm not sure how far is it gonna go, but we have to realize that we've been in deflationary environment for the last 20 years because we've been outsourcing all the labor to, China and whatever, Indonesia, Malaysia, to all these countries. But at the same time, we had millions and millions of Chinese people kind of, go from like poverty line to like kind of
middle class
middle
almost.
class. Yeah.
Yeah,
And this labor is not as cheap as it used to be, and some things going to have to be adjusted. As we're seeing that, we also see what's going on right now with the Russia and Ukraine, and I read some articles about the French, where they having, I think, an election. I'm not sure if it's this year or next year, where they have another party which is very, supported, almost like 50%, where it's a little bit more kind of, not looking towards globalization, but kind of, like Trump said, America first. They kind of doing France first,
yeah.
and a
Oh,
lot
there's
of countries, yeah, and a lot of countries are going into this environment. So, I don't think, and and once we start kind of bringing jobs back, and because we're gonna have to have factories, if we deviate from that, right, we're gonna have to build new stuff, and while we're gonna be doing that, until we're gonna bring all this back, I think we're gonna have, inflation at elevated levels. And even when they do, the labor costs here are going to be way more higher than it would be somewhere else, unless we figure, or the big corps figure out a way how to make the same factories in Africa or India or something like that, where they still have a lot of cheap labor, just no
Yeah.
infrastructure here. But you can think yourself, if you need to kind of build factories down there, first you have to get kind of permission, from the government in order to do
Yeah.
that, and to build it, then to hire people to train them. I mean, this takes years and years and years. And having all that in mind, we have kind of, our government and a lot of governments around the Europe, where they say, well, we don't need gas, we don't need oil, we don't need this or that, and our administration has been very hesitant in giving those permits, to kind of get oil out of the ground, get natural gas, where we could be completely sustainable. And
Yeah.
this narrative, Putin price hikes, right? That the White House started kind of pouring on everybody before the midterms come around, right? They need to
Yep.
do some sort of adjustments to get those
Propaganda.
votes.
You're talking about the
Exactly,
propaganda.
exactly. And they starting doing that, even though like people have to realize this is not because that is because of the policies that have been implemented over the last several years,
Yeah.
going back, where we just not allowing, these great corporations like, like Chevron, just to let them do what they do best.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's,
No, no. So, so you're saying that workforce has gone from poverty to a middle class, right? That's absolutely what's been happening to that demographic. So that cost is increasing there. We're becoming more uh, deglobalized as a world, right? So now we already see it with the chip manufacturers wanting to set up more and more shops here, more manufacturing capabilities here in the United States. And other countries, you bring up France, other countries are doing the same exact thing because they also don't want to be held hostage to getting goods, products from other countries. So I've been looking at this whole deglobalization that we are facing into. And I not only look at, for example, we'll use semiconductor manufacturers, right? It's not just about building the plants here in this country. It's also about getting the raw materials to those plants, right? And when you start researching where those raw materials come from, those top three components that go into the semiconductor industry to make the wafers where the semiconductors are cut from, right? Silicon, gallium arsenide, and germanium. China is the top producer. Even if we're manufacturing those chips in the United States, and granted, our costs are going to be more just for the manufacturing process because of labor and just our cost structure here in the United States versus overseas. Those raw materials to get them here, buying them, especially from China, I mean, we're not going to get them at a discount. That's for sure.
no.
So the raw materials going into, and I've looked at the pharmaceutical industry, same thing there. A lot of the base components of the drugs, come from China. I look at these different things, trying to understand where's the raw material coming from, and it goes back to, again, what you hit on, some of the propaganda that's coming out from the politicians saying, oh, we're going to do good, we're going to manufacture this in the United States, we're going to be self-sufficient. It's great to have the manufacturing plants here, but you still got to get the raw material to those plants.
Right now it's a complete spider web as it goes through the world. Right now, I think we're gonna transition ourselves to having some allies, and the bad actors kind of, I
Yeah.
think the world is kind of a little bit divide itself between who's friends with who, and they kind of will determine of the price of those materials. If you take into consideration the countries that have the most natural resources are 80% authoritarian, right?
Yeah.
So they are ruled by one guy who's that bad actor, right?
Yep.
So and usually, it's really hard to deal with them. So, getting materials from them when you was hitting them on the head, 20 years prior, I think it's gonna be a struggle.
We love listening to folks like Adam Taggart at
Yeah,
Wealthion.
yeah.
He has a beautiful YouTube channel and podcast. I mean, if the viewers aren't familiar with Wealthion, Adam Taggart, look him up, subscribe. He's a great guy. Great information there. Drew, thank you so much for being with us here today. If folks want to look you up or find you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Translinesinc.com. This is where we located at. If you need to move some freight, if you wanna, if you need a truck, just go down there. If you're a driver and looking for a good company for a good fit for you, we are over the road carrier. Please feel free to go down there. There's contact forms, there's application forms, there's contact phone numbers where you can call and get some information. So yeah, please go ahead and do that. And we'll be glad to, kind of help each other out.
Yeah, no, excellent. No, Drew, you're a good guy. I appreciate you. I appreciate your perspective on things. And maybe in another couple of months here, we'll see how things go. We'll have you back on for a fresh perspective. Okay.